And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Laraib, as we are super excited to break down week 6 of the NFL season. All 16 games, or not 16, because we get two teams on bye. All 15 games have gone down this week, Laraib. Ton of stuff to get into. There are no more undefeated teams in the NFL, and there is still one team, Carolina Panthers, who have yet to win a game, but a lot has been changing in the middle. There's so much to get into, Larav. Anything you want to say before we hop into our picks?
You mean our recap? All right, yes, our picks from last week. Let's just go
Yeah.
ahead and just rip off the band-aid from this week. We didn't get to show y'all from last week, even though I won. But this one, I know I may be your beautiful co-host, for my picks this week were definitely not beautiful. Picking my Buccaneers at home was a tough task, or a tall order against the Lions. And of course, my Chargers lose to the Cowboys on Monday night, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I went on a limb. I changed my mind, and I went with Washington at the end. That proved to be a good pick for me. Um, both of our upsets didn't hit, so that kind of nullified itself. Both of our locks pick. So really, it came down to the Lions and the Commanders for me, and they pulled it out. So I'm very happy with those picks. If I could have one pick back, I may have tried to go with Cincinnati, but it is what it is. That was a tough game to predict. But Laura, let's without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into last night's action, Monday Night Football, where you were adamant that the Los Angeles Chargers were going to come out with a win. I made it my lock of the week. The Cowboys were going to pull it out, and it was never a doubt.
Oh,
Never a
really?
doubt
That's not
last
what the
night.
text messages on my phone tell me. That was
Nope.
never in doubt.
Never in doubt. The Cowboys dominate the Chargers last night.
Oh, really? That's what happened
Um,
in that game?
I'll say this. Dak Prescott, I think, had his best game of the season last night. I think how he was able to move around. I'll start on the good side. Then we'll get to Jay Herbo. Um, but I think Dak had his best game of the year, which is very promising for Cowboys fans. He was really using his legs a lot. And that was kind of like the only big positives when was he getting out of the pocket, hitting guys downfield, being creative, making things happen, extending plays. And that's where Dak Prescott really thrived last night. We saw on like the biggest play of the game when he got out, rolled out of a sack, rolled out to his right, hit Pollard over the middle. Pollard makes the guy miss and goes for 60 yards and really, kickstarts that game clinching drive for the Cowboys. So huge play from Dak Prescott last night. He looked very impressive, and he's going to need to look like that if Mike McCarthy is as dumb of a coach in some of these situations as he's proven to be. I mean, that's what you get from the Cowboys. You get questionable late game execution, and there's it feels like Mike McCarthy just has no trust in his franchise quarterback. And that situation, Larob, when it's 2 minutes left in the game, it's 1st and 10, you get stuffed on a run, which we were not able to run the ball at all last night. Chew some clock. 2nd down, you go for an end zone shot, which is just not a great play call. I mean, he was open. Dak probably should have given him a better ball, but that's just a very risky route in that situation. And even then, you're still giving the Chargers time to do something with on the clock. So, I mean, and then on 3rd down, you just don't trust your quarterback whatsoever. You play conservative and you give Justin Herbert the ball back. Thankfully, the defense was able to step up, and Justin Herbert and the Chargers do what they do best. And, they choke like usual. That's why you
Tell
can
me when
never
it's
have
my
faith.
turn. Tell me when it's my turn.
That's why, oh, give me a second. That's why you can never have faith in that team. But overall, the lack of a pass rush last night against this Chargers team was a bit concerning if you're a Cowboys fan, but I think their defense played pretty well. The secondary is starting to give me some concerns if you're a Cowboys fan. Obviously the loss to Diggs, we know it's going to, not be a good thing for this team going down, but some of the Gilmore penalties and stuff, he got away with one as well in the end zone, but he was really getting burnt last night by some of those receivers. And Deron Blend, he looks like a really good corner, but how are you going to be able to trust him throughout an entire 17-game season? That'll all be put to the test. If this pass rush can't get home, then the secondary is really going to be tested all season long. But thankfully, they have an easy stretch going forward. And I'll let you talk about your pick.
Well, first I want to talk about this Cowboys team, which you talk about. how well they played on offense. Besides Dak Prescott and maybe CeeDee Lamb, I was not really impressed by anybody else, Lewis. If you go out there on prime time and you make this Chargers defense look good, shame on you, Cowboys. I mean, we talked about how bad this Chargers defense was all season long, especially to the secondary. You talk about on the ground, you have 50-year-old Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, who's been one of the most inconsistent players in the NFL, and you go out there and make them look good. All the third down stops they got, of course, the red zone inefficiencies for this Cowboys team, but they're playing against my Chargers and they eke out the win. So, congratulations to the Cowboys team. You made a Chargers defense look really, really outstanding on primetime. And then flip it on over. Everyone's talking about Justin Herbert and how he's a fraud, he's a choke artist. But all I could think about on that last drive was flashbacks to that Miami game in week 1. You and I were watching that together when when Justin Herbert needed that offensive line the most to go on those game-winning comebacks. He's had 14, Lewis, fourth-quarter comeback wins since he's been in the NFL, by the way. So you can quit all this shit, all right? So whenever he needs the offensive line to protect him on that last drive, what do? They just had Micah Parsons come to life, who was shut down all night. Now, my guy, who I said was the best defensive player in the NFL this year, was pedestrian for the most of the game, but he came alive in the end. Of course, all those damn holding calls as well, all throughout the game by the offensive line. It was just horrendous to see. Now, Justin Herbert misses one throw to Keenan Allen, and now
I'm glad you're bringing this up because I was just about to.
And the whole thing now is on him, not on his offensive line getting holding penalties, not on his offensive line illegal man down the field garbage. No, it's all on Justin Herbert's fault for not winning a game against the Cowboys defense at home. And so,
I'm just saying, Laraib, when I was watching that game, there's quarterbacks in the NFL when they have the ball in that situation, you sit there and you're like, yeah, chalk this one up. We're going home, boys. Like they have too much time. Watching Justin Herbert with the ball, I was not scared a bit because I knew.
Why are you lying to me? Why are you lying to the people?
Whether it be his fault or something else going on, the Chargers were gonna charger it up some way, somehow. That's a verb now, and you know it is. But you brought it up, Laura. But you're saying all this stuff about the offensive line. He missed Keenan Allen wide open on a route that was just beautifully ran by Keenan. And that's a throw you have to make. Mahomes makes that throw. The upper echelon guys in this league who you love to compare to Justin Herbert
is not one of those
Joe
guys.
Burrow makes that throw. Trevor Lawrence makes that throw
all year. Also talking about Joe Burrow, he made that Seahawks defense look good this past weekend. So I mean,
and he won. And Mahomes won, and Trevor won. All these contemporaries of Justin Herbert, while I feel like his entire career, he's been in this range of, he's a very good quarterback. No one's going to rank him outside the top 10. No one's going to put him at the top, but he has the ceiling. He has capability, and it's always the offensive line. It's always the coach. And I'm not saying those things aren't true, Laraib. Don't get that twisted. I do think Justin Herbert is a very good quarterback, but he's just that tier below to where he's not he's not going to change things. He's not going to change the life of a franchise. He needs the requisite talent to improve his game. He's not a riser with he rises with the current. He doesn't pull the current. He's not a moon. That's what I need. I need a moon.
I highly disagree. In his career, he's always had bottom 10 defenses who he almost drags to all those second games late in the season that he has to drag this team to any sort of wins, Lewis. You talk about all the inconsistencies on the offensive line. The coaches try to give away the games. You think back to the Vikings game where you're going for it inside your own 30-yard line with, X amount of time left in the game. Every single time he goes out on the field, everything is against him. You talk about his bad offensive line, all the penalties.
I just it's always the case.
They always have a road game to play. Every single game is a road game.
True. Okay, but here's my problem is what is going to change? Because now they're 2-4 or 2-3, excuse me. And you go to Kansas City next week. Odds are, Laraib, they're not winning this division. And odds are they're not making the playoffs this year. And even if they do you love their chances in the playoffs? I do not, against some of the other AFC teams. So this is another year of Herbert's prime wasted. And guess what's coming around the corner? That massive contract you're paying him. Is Justin Herbert in the top 10 of biggest problems for this Chargers team? No, not at all. He is one of the few bright spots. But when it comes down to what you're getting out of your quarterback, he's not an Andrew Luck. He's not a Patrick Mahomes. He's not a guy who just fixes things and finds ways to win because, sure, he did all he could, but he still threw the pick at the end of the game. I mean, that's what happened, Laraib. He lost their team the game on the final play. You can't deny that. So at what point is he going to get this help? At what point are the Chargers going to figure it out? And if I've watched the Chargers for as long as I have, Laraib, it's not going to be the case. So at some point, the discussion has to change around Herbert and the Chargers about maybe it's just not the right spot for him, or maybe there needs to, because the Chargers aren't going to let him go, right? So what do? We'll get into more big picture stuff later, but my recap from the game is I have a lot of questions about this Chargers team that I've had all year, and they continue to prove me right. And I do not think they're going to make the playoffs, Laraib. Do you?
At this rate, no. But hopefully that means their head coach is gone and they have someone else next year at that position, Lewis.
It's a win-win, huh?
But let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We have both the undefeated teams this week, Lewis. The Eagles and the 49ers both lost in concerning games on the road. But now, Lewis, are looking at these two teams, which team are you more concerned about after their loss?
I mean, I feel like the easy answer is the Eagles in this sense because, you play against the Jets, who have a good defense. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, it's not the best in the NFL. They're a very, very good defense. But the way Jalen Hurts has played, not only in this game, but all season, he's just felt very disorganized. It feels like he's trying to feed guys. He's trying to get guys, the ball, and he's trying to force things. And that's just not his game. He's staying way too long in the pocket. He's late on reads. And it just looks unnatural from how easy it looked last year. He already has 5 interceptions this season. He had 7 all of last year. So, obviously the loss of Shane Steichen is really hurting this offense for the Eagles. They're trying to figure it out as they go. And, just questionable decision-making. Like when they had the ball, you're up 2 and there's 2 minutes and change left. And it's a 2 yards to gain. You throw the ball? Why are you throwing the ball in that situation? If anything, the way your offensive line has been, you have to trust them to at least get a yard. Because if they get a yard, then here comes the tush push. And then you're guaranteed a first down. But no, they decide to throw it. It gets picked off at the end of the game. And then Jets go down, score. Eagles can't score back. Game over. It's very weird how the brain trust of this team. Now, that's what happens when you lose 2 of your coordinators. Things get disorganized. Things get messy. And disagree with me or agree with me, Laura. Is this Eagles team, do they look worse than last year?
Oh, for sure. Like you mentioned, that offensive line is going to be their offensive line. It's not that hard to mess up a rushing attack. But their passing schemes this year, Lewis, like you mentioned, has been all sorts of discombobulated. And, like you mentioned, the Jets maybe not the best team in the league, but they still have a good defense. And at home, they've been pretty solid. But in this one, like you mentioned, your strength of your team has been rushing, and they are trying to do too much, in my opinion, trying to throw the ball. They have top-tier guys on the outside, but sometimes you just have to understand the strength of your team is that offensive line and those running backs that you have. And they just weren't able to, just figure that out against the Jets late in that one. But I want to talk about this 49ers team a little bit. Now, obviously, that is a game that they easily could have won, but now you're missing 2 guys in Christian McCaffrey, who potentially could play this week. And of course, Deebo Samuel, banged up shoulder, and even Trent Williams in that game was out for a little bit, but he came back in and finished it out. And so like you mentioned in our predictions, these injuries are starting to rack up for this 49ers team slowly and slowly. Now, obviously, I think they didn't have as bad of a loss against the Eagles in what they missed a chip shot field goal, and they could easily be 6-0 right now. But those injuries, even that game, we thought it was going to be like a monsoon, raining, everyone's going to be slipping around, but it just looked like a cloudy day. And still we saw a lot of 49ers players go down.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I talked about it, like in this environment, win or lose, we both predicted the 49ers to win, but I mentioned this is a game against a super physical Browns defense in which you have guys on the road in a not that great environment, bad weather, with a propensity to get injured. Kittle, Debo, McCaffrey. 2 of them go down. Like you mentioned, Williams has an injury scare. And, we see Brock Purdy, he's mortal. This was his first bad game of his career, and it was undoubtedly bad. But you're still encouraged because they had a shot. He set them up to win the game in the end. And the kicker just missed a field goal in crappy conditions. I feel fine about this 49ers team. This is it's crazy stat, Laraib. I saw Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator of the Browns, is 8-1 against Kyle Shanahan in his career. Safe to say, I like this Browns defense. I think they have some good pieces on their roster. They will not be facing this team in the Super Bowl when the 49ers get there, if they get there. I'm not going to tip my hand too fast. But I feel like this is just, coming off that huge Cowboys win, you were due for a letdown. We've seen this all across the NFL all season. Whenever you have a big emotional win, the letdown comes the next week. So I think the 49ers will be fine. And one of the things I didn't mention with the Eagles, Rob, that I want to hit on very, very quickly, their schedule coming up is an absolute gauntlet.
And it all starts with this weekend against the Dolphins. It's going to be
right. Dolphins on Sunday Night Football. I'm super excited to watch that game. But then at Commanders, which we know isn't going to be an easy game. They had a tough game against Commanders early on this season. And then you have Cowboys, Chiefs, Bills, 49ers, Cowboys, Seahawks. That is a gauntlet right there of just back to back to back, super tough games. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this Eagles team can come together and gel during that time, because it is going to be a very rough stretch for them if they can't figure out some of these quarterback issues.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to the 49ers, I have to disagree with you a little bit. Brock Purdy, maybe not the best game of his career, but when they needed him in that fourth quarter to make the drive, he did it, in my opinion. And that was just a bad miss, because if he makes that field goal, we're not talking about how bad Purdy played. In my opinion, he did just enough for them.
Well, he also threw an interception that was dropped on the first play of that drive. So if we would play the ifs games, if that ball's picked off.
Well, it wasn't an if scenario. He did it. He drove them down the field when they needed to get into field goal range. So,
I that's what I'm saying. I still have faith in Brock Purdy. I just think he was due for a bad game. I think the whole team was due for a bad game, and it happened. I think he'll be fine. Some of the people in the media who are just trying to get clicks are saying, "You see, I told you, this Brock Purdy, he's not the truth. He's bad." And I'd love to get into a big Brock Purdy discussion with you at some point, but now's not the time. I think the 49ers are fine. Eagles, though, I have more question marks. But another team that joined them at the top echelon of the NFC at 5-1 is the Detroit Lions, Laraib. After dismantling your Buccaneers in a 20-9 fashion, this team has been looking amazing. In their last 17 games, they're 13-4. Jared Goff has been playing MVP caliber football. And, we see in that game, they just find ways to win. David Montgomery goes down. They're not able to run the ball as effectively. So what do? Jared Goff, 350 passing yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown is just killing the Buccaneers underneath, over the middle, and they're finding ways to win. I'm just super impressed with this Lions team, Laraib. But the question I have for you, do you view them as a potential Super Bowl contender at this point in the season?
At this point, I would have to say no. They have not shown me enough, to be honest. Now, I agree with you. The offense has been humming for the last season and a half, to be quite frank. Even when guys go down, they're still able to figure something out on the offensive side of the ball. But the big thing for them this year, Lewis, has been that defense, right? A lot of guys who have really stepped up, Brian Branch, Aiden Hutchinson, in his second year have just been outstanding. But they really haven't played anybody this year, Lewis, besides the Chiefs, in my opinion, to kind of strike that fear in my heart so far. You talk about playing the Packers.
Well, they're really not going to.
And the Bucks. But see, this is where my point comes up. They play the Ravens this week, and that's where you're going to face a team who maybe have not lived up to the greatest of expectations. But you talk about a team that is going to be disciplined on the defense side of the ball, that's going to have a dual threat quarterback who's really going to put this defense to the test. I think this is going to be the next week where we see them move up into the upper echelon. But right now in the NFC, let me ask you, would you take them over the Cowboys right now?
No, I would not.
And then the 49ers, no?
No.
And the Eagles, no?
No.
See,
I
the
think they're
Cowboys,
solidly in that fourth spot. You could argue them in Seattle for that fourth best team in the NFC.
and I would give it to the Lions, to be honest, because this Seahawks offense, 5 trips to the red zone, only 10
Oof.
points. It was awful game when, especially in a game where our defense. Oh, we'll talk. Seahawks.
We'll
Maybe
get to it.
for
We'll
another
get to it.
time.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, but for this Lions team, you really want to see. They play the Ravens, and like you mentioned, besides that, they play the Cowboys this year, and then the rest of that schedule looks pretty pedestrian in my opinion. And so as long as they win the games that they're supposed to and continue to hum on offense, of course with Ben Johnson as offensive coordinator, I think they're right there with a team. And then you talk about teams like the 49ers who get injured, a team like the Eagles who haven't really figured out in the passing attack. This team could very well be one of the Super Bowl contenders. But we know the bad history and the bad luck that this Lions team has.
No, don't bring it up.
So to crown them at this moment, I think would be a little too early.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laraib. I think this is too early. And when you mention the defense, the thing that concerns me is the back half of that defense, the secondary especially. It's just, you lose your best corner, Mosley, to an ACL. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson goes down with a pec injury, so he's done for the season. And Brian Branch has been dealing with ankle injuries all season long, although he's shown a lot of really spectacular flashes for this defense. So I'm just worried about the back end of this defense. They really haven't played a great quarterback since week 1 when all their guys were healthy and Patrick Mahomes. And let's be honest, it wasn't Patrick Mahomes that was playing bad. It was just those receivers who were just kept dropping passes for him. So that's my biggest concern right now with this team is how can they rebuild? How can they adjust in the secondary? Because their schedule going forward, they could win the 1 seed, Rob. When I say like this schedule is very winnable for them to pick up a lot of wins, I think they're by far and away. It's funny when we did our division predictions, we both picked the Packers to win this division. I think if we could change that pick now, we absolutely would. But I think the rest of this division is pretty awful at this stage and, all of their seasons, except for the Lions. So I think those are 6 easy wins on the season for them. And, the rest of their schedule really isn't that tough. They play the NFC South. They play the AFC North, which is just going to beat itself up the entire time. So they have a lot of winnable games here on their schedule coming up. And if they get that 1 seed in Detroit, I don't know, Jim. It could be a very interesting shakeout in the playoffs. All they need to do is get in, and then from there it's any given Sunday. So I'm not saying they can't, but I need to see more. I think we're on the same page with that. But speaking of a team that we've seen maybe more than enough of, and I'm getting real sick and tired of, is about 2 weeks ago, the last time we filmed one of these, we sat here and we debated who's the best team in the AFC between the Bills and the Chiefs. And since then, Laraib, the Bills have lost in pretty embarrassing fashion to the Jaguars overseas and then come back at a home game and, have the daylight scared out of them by a Tyrod Taylor-led Giants team that nearly beat them at the end of the game. So do you still have, what is your panic meter on a scale of 1 to 10 on your AFC champion Bills?
It's at probably a cool 7 or 8 right now. Our guy, Matt Milano, done for the season. Tre'Davious White, done for the season. Damian Harris, scary injury. He probably will be done for the season. Early on, they started to get a rushing attack with James Cook, and then that slowly just fell apart week after week.
I have no idea where that went.
And now it's 50-year-old Latavius Murray trying to get you those yards in between the tackles and just disappeared.
Oh, he's injured now too.
Yep. And so now, once again, it's on Josh Allen, who he's a veteran quarterback now, still making rookie mistakes. They have the guy still on offense, and still it's just those bad mistakes that they always make on offense, typical Bills fashion. And talk about one of those cursed franchises. It has to be the Bills right there with the Lions as well. And now you talk about, they still have to play the Dolphins again this season. They still have to play the Jets again this season. It's not going to be easy for them. And of course, with all the injuries starting to pile up, Lewis, it's starting to look really, really scary for this Buffalo team.
Yeah, I was really excited going into that London game because you're getting Von Miller back. The defense was already humming, but you lose Matt Milano, and he was playing at an all-pro level this season. I know Fred Warner gets all the hype, but Matt Milano was playing on that level. And, you already lost Terrell Edmonds, excuse me, in free agency. So you're already kind of thin at that spot. So now you're putting a lot on Epinesa and these other linebackers to really, void that gap. And we saw, the Giants were able to run the ball, but it's not their defense. It's just the offense is so herky-jerky, such a roller coaster every week. You have no idea what you're getting out of this team. And it almost seems like Josh Allen continually plays down to his competition, which is a super bad habit in some of these big primetime games. This is Tyrod Taylor we're talking about with an awful offensive line, awful weapons, and why are we allowing them to stick around? We need to be able to run the ball. We need to be able to play efficient offense and have those guys on their heels trying to catch up so our pass rush can tee off. I mean, you lose Leslie Frazier as the play caller. Sean McDermott is now calling the defensive plays. Second year with who's the offensive coordinator now? Oh, he's losing my mind. Ken Dorsey. So you expect things to be a little more ironed out now. And like you said, this is a veteran making rookie mistakes. He needs to figure it out. But as it stands now, Laraib, I mean, how in good confidence can I pick this team to win the AFC this year? I really can't with all the injuries and stuff piling up. So I don't know. It just a lot of problems for this team, Laraib. But let's go. Did you want to respond to that at all?
Well, maybe not the 1 seed for them, like you mentioned, but they're still going to be in the playoffs. You talk about how.
Do you think they won the division?
They win their division.
They already beat the Dolphins once.
I would say, but that's the different Bills defense now. We talk about the injuries racked up. Tre'Davious White went down in that game, and now I would say
it's tough.
It is tough, but give me the Dolphins. I think this is the year Mike McDaniel is one of the funniest guys in the entire NFL. He's going to find a way to win that division this year. I feel like it's their year. The Bills have been at the top, and they've tried their best, Lewis. But like you mentioned, with the inconsistencies on offense, I think this is the year the Dolphins win it.
I agree with you, Laraib. I think the Dolphins win this division, and Bills on the road in the playoffs. We'll see what happens from there. But speaking of the AFC playoffs, one of these teams in the AFC North will be hosting a playoff game this year. But who will it be, Laraib? Because so far it has been a jumbled up mess in this division. Right now, the Ravens lead at 4-2. Browns are 3-2. The Bengals are 3-3, and the Steelers are 3-2. So, preseason we both had. I think we both had the Bengals, correct? Ravens. Excuse me. Yeah, we both had the Ravens. We're looking pretty good so far, but I mean, it's just so hard for me with the Bengals to I can't give up on them.
Shiesty is never out of it, even after a bad.
He looked bad against the Seahawks. I mean, I can't believe y'all lost that game. I picked the Seahawks.
Oh, I can't believe we lost either. 5 red zone trips.
Y'all outgained them by 250 yards, and 10 points in 5 red zone trips is pretty pathetic. And DK Metcalf can't get out of his own damn way. I know you're pretty upset about that, but I mean, I just can't give up on these Bengals because they just find ways, and Burrow's playing better, I guess, but he looked pretty bad against the Seahawks. So I don't know what that team. The only known commodity out of all of these teams is all of their defenses are lights out, which is just crazy to me. I mean, in what world are every single one of them? These might be the best 4 defenses in the NFL. I'm not joking. And so it really comes down to quarterback and head coach. And at this point of the year, Laraib, Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh are who I trust the most. Do you agree with me?
I have to. If you look at everyone else, you don't trust Kenny Pickett, even though they were your darlings this year. Deshaun Watson with an injury, he was. I really don't understand what's going on there because he was cleared to play, then he wasn't cleared to play. Just a lot of questions about that, and of course, just his inconsistency so far this season. But who's sitting at the bottom of the division right now? The Bengals. I think they are the team that has the best shot, besides the Ravens, to win it. Just because Joe Burrow, I think they have a bye week this week, Lewis, and so if we can nurse that calf injury a little bit more, they've been doing just enough on offense to scrape by the past 2 weeks. And so, like you mentioned, that defense has been really rallying it off. Just not even in that front 7, just that front 4, just the pressure they've gotten, especially. We talk about how bad the Seahawks were in the red zone. It was because of that, Bengals pass rush. They were in Geno Smith's face all game, especially on that last drive, man. They wrapped him up on those last 2 downs, and it was just unfortunate that my Seahawks couldn't get it done. But it was that pass rush. Trey Hendrickson, just an outstanding season from him so far. But overall, I would still lean Baltimore to win the division. I think Lamar Jackson, you just hope they can figure something out in the past.
Right.
We saw Zay Flowers caught a touchdown this past week over there in the UK at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And so, the Ravens are going to Raven. That defense is always going to be stellar, and that rushing attack is always going to be great. And so give me the Ravens still to win the division.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page, but you always got to keep an eye out for the Bengals. The Browns, that defense probably is the best in the division, but a PJ Walker, Jerome Ford quarterback, running back combo is no Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb. And even then, Deshaun Watson, I don't want to get into it, but it's a lot of
a difficult guy to root for.
Very difficult. And Browns fans are really trying hard. I hate him. I hate his ass. But, Browns fans are really trying hard to rationalize that decision. All that guaranteed money, it's all in his pocket. Nothing you can do now. If he wants to sit, whatever. You've already paid him. The Browns are going to Brown. We talked about the Bills and the Lions, but the Browns are going to Brown. We know that. All right, finally, last segment of the episode, Laraib. We have our Thursday night football preview. We will be at this game, folks. It is the Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to New Orleans to face my Saints. Saints favored by 1 in this game. The biggest question that looms over this game is the status of Trevor Lawrence's injury. And we saw this line last night. You mentioned it, Laraib. It was at Saints by 3. And obviously that had to do with Trevor Lawrence's status entering this game. Since we've heard reports that he really wants to give it a go against the Saints. So then the line has come down a bit. Still, Saints are favored. But you got to imagine, if Trevor Lawrence plays in this game, the Jaguars will be favored. And is that who you're going with, Laraib?
Since I will be at this game, since I will be rocking my Hall of Fame Drew Brees jersey, best quarterback to ever touch a football, since I will be in attendance for your birthday for this game, I have to go with the New Orleans Saints. Now, you talk about just an awful defeat on the road against my Texans, by the way, which I called. I think they're going to be at home. They really figured something out, in my opinion, in that game with Chris Olave. We saw him have a great week 1, week 2, but really fell off the past couple weeks. But that one, we really saw him led the team in targets, led the team in catches, led the team in yards. He is the guy you want to go to. I understand Michael Thomas has a huge contract. He's been the guy in New Orleans for the, maybe not the last 2 years, but since he's been in New Orleans, he's been that guy. But I really think they're starting, Pete, we also showed me a stat, Lewis, that Pete Carmichael has the lowest, EPA in the entire NFL by a large margin. And now you're at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have an emotional win against the Colts, a divisional rival. I think Trevor Lawrence was limited at practice today, but even if he goes, I expect that Saints pass rush to get after him in this one. And the Saints defense, Lewis, which really did not give up that much in the second half against the Texans game. They really buttoned it up, and they gave their offense every single opportunity to win that one. And it wasn't on the defense in that one. And so I think the defense once again steps up in this one. If Trevor Lawrence is limping into this game, I can guarantee you he's limping out when that Saints rush is going to be on him all game long. And so give me the Saints. Expect a Rashid Shaheed speedster touchdown on this one to put the Saints up 24-21.
Rob.
Don't do it. Do not do it. Do not do it.
We're going to be in-house. It is my birthday. LeBron year.
Jordan year.
Gosh.
Don't do it.
I'm going with the Saints, baby.
Yes, sir. Yes,
we'll
sir.
be in the house. We'll be giving them that energy. When you bring up the pass rush, I don't buy it. But maybe against a hobble Trevor Lawrence, they'll be able to get home. I think that we're going to do a really good job against the receivers, although Calvin Ridley has always been pretty good against Marshawn Lattimore in his career. I just don't think that, I think he's lost his step. I just haven't seen it with Calvin Ridley this season. But just control that passing game. Our secondary, just let them get to work. And then offensively, we just need to figure it out. We have the pieces. We have the parts. And it just seems like we need good field position. We need this. We need a Rashid Shaheed punt return. We can't just march down the field.
We also need good field goal kicking too.
Well, that's true. That is also true. But, at home in the dome. You feel like that'll be that won't be that big of an issue in this game. But right, knock on freaking wood. But I just have a feeling Saints won't let me down. I'm going Saints 23 to Jaguars 20. 23 points for your boy in this ball game. But Laraib, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Lots of awesome stuff that we got into today. And, we're going to be doing our next podcast. We're probably going to be filming it tomorrow, but we're going to be posting it on Thursday for all of our picks for next week. So make sure you tune in to that. Otherwise, Laraib, you got anything else for this episode?
No, I think that's the First to Go podcast signing off.
Peace.